This program is sponsored in part by the National Catholic Society of Foresters. Hello again and welcome to Looking at Social Justice. I'm Jim Grant and it's my privilege each week to usually have the pleasure of having a guest who in some way is working with social justice themes, working for social justice in Fresno County, usually Fresno, the Valley, or the state of California. We even have people who have come from Massachusetts. We've got people coming from Washington, D.C. Not important. What is important is the type of areas that they are exposing for us as social justice concerns. So today we have a topic that is the 68th program, but it is actually the first time in this series we've dealt with domestic violence as a social injustice. We're going to look at, you might say, the downside, the sad fact that the human dignity of persons, which is the first principle of Catholic social teaching, the right to life and the dignity of a human person, each person unique, needing to be counted, needing to be loved, is violated so often in domestic relationships. So, out of all the places to talk about domestic violence, the center called the Marjoree Mason Center in Fresno would be the go-to place to address for us here in our forum of the Looking at Social Justice the issue of how Marjorie Mason for so long now, 40 years, has been working to heal domestic violence, to recuperate and rehabilitate and to heal our community. Our guest today happens to be the director of both development and communications at the Marjorie Mason Center, and that's Charity Susnick. So Charity, could you just introduce yourself? You gave me a little bio. I wanted you to unpack maybe where you're from, where you've gone to school, which are interesting, and your parish affiliation, which are all beautiful things for us to learn a little bit about Charity.
Sure.
So you're from Indiana. What brought you to West Coast?
Yes, well, I actually came to the Fresno Central Valley, Fresno in 1997. At that time, it was with my husband, who is now my ex-husband, so a little bit of personal change in my life there. But love California, love the Central Valley in Fresno. I've been connected here now for 22 years, a native of southern Indiana, so yeah.
Go Hoosiers.
Go. Well, I'm actually funny, a University of Kentucky Wildcat fan.
Oh,
you know,
sorry.
Indiana's all about basketball.
Yes.
But I happen to be a Wildcat fan, so that's okay.
I'm an Eagle from Boston College.
There
so
you go. See, those affiliations end up
are
being all over
important.
the place.
But another affiliation that's
Sure.
very powerful, Fresno Pacific.
Yes, I actually, after we moved here in 1997, I completed my bachelor's degree through the degree completion program at Fresno Pacific in Christian Ministries. Nice. And then in 2012, while I was also an employee at Fresno Pacific, I completed my master's in leadership and organizational studies. So I had the joy of not only being a student there, but I spent 12 years on staff working in fundraising and with alumni and with the wonderful donors and folks at Fresno Pacific. And now I have a daughter who's actually a senior at Fresno Pacific, and she's set to graduate in May.
And the final touch would be that you were received into the church.
I was.
5 years ago.
Yes.
Tell us about that and that process of coming to Catholicism and your commitment, your affiliation with Divine Mercy Parish.
Sure, well, absolutely. I was raised in an evangelical Protestant church. Actually grew up with family members in ministry. And after I went through my divorce in 1997, in the early mid-2000s, started dating a man who is Catholic. And so for the longest time, he would attend my church, I would attend his church. And then in 2013, I really felt like God was sort of tugging on my heart and saying, you need to learn more about the Catholic faith.
Nice.
And so I started the RCIA program at St. Anthony's here in Fresno and was confirmed in spring of 2014. And so since that time, Divine Mercy Parish is actually very close to my home. In fact, where the new church is going to be built at Thompson and Ashland is just 2 minutes from my house.
Isn't that nice?
So I've been attending the Divine Mercy Parish with Father Craig. We meet at Clovis East High School, and so just really enjoying not only just my initiation into the Catholic faith, but growing as a Catholic, and now being an active part of Divine Mercy.
Well, what's beautiful about your putting into action your faith is where you're doing it. So domestic violence is just a poison that is in our community. Mm-hmm. It's everywhere, but Fresno has it very, very seriously.
Sure.
Why don't you tell us about domestic violence so it's very clear to us, or clearer to us, what that is, mm-hmm. and then I guess after that, how in the Valley and in the Fresno County it is so prevalent.
Sure.
So introduce us to domestic violence.
Well, so at Marjoree Mason Center, when we use the term domestic violence, we're referring to intimate partner violence. So what that means is that there has been a breach in the relationship between a married couple, a couple who has formerly dated or is dating. So intimate partner is that key word for us. And so what domestic violence is, it's a pattern of behaviors used by one individual to exert power and control over another individual. And the sad thing about any abuse, but especially about domestic violence, is it happens to people that we love, we care about, we have an emotional connection with, and that's very difficult. So it's a very traumatic issue to face and to deal with for all adults. For a long time, people just assumed or thought that domestic violence only happened to women. That's not actually the case. The numbers, as they are nationally or statistically, is 1 in 4 women will. 1 in 4 women will experience domestic violence in their lifetime. 1 in 7 men.
Wow.
And that number for teenagers, which is actually the most alarming, is 1 in 3 teens. And that starts as early as age 12 up through age 22 is how they actually categorize it.
Oh, so it's already sad to hear those statistics, mm-hmm. but I would not have been able to think it was 1 out of 3 young women mm-hmm. already. Mm-hmm. 1 out of 7 men, mm-hmm. but 1 out of 4 women mm-hmm. will be domestically violated.
Mm-hmm. Oh. And so the way that looks is, in domestic violence, I think that a perception is it's only the physical violence. There are many, many types of domestic violence. Economic abuse can happen where one partner is controlling the checkbook, so to speak, of the family, and not allowing maybe food purchases or clothing purchases or the things that need to happen. Emotional abuse is very common. Verbal, tearing down someone's self-confidence and their belief in themselves of who they are as a human being. It's very degrading. Spiritual abuse is actually another one of those where one partner may keep the other partner from practicing the faith that they grew up in or are familiar with. And then destructive acts is probably another less common one that's known, and that's where it's actually destroying someone's personal property. Surprisingly enough, many times a pet is part of that, where just as a way to control another individual, a pet could be injured or even worse, just as a way to control a person. And so there's a pattern actually that happens in domestic violence. Typically the first act is not that physical, that punch or that kick or that pinch. Typically the violence gets more severe as time goes, but that pattern of how it works is there's that explosion that happens. One partner gets upset with the other partner and whatever it is happens. after that period of time, usually the next phase in the cycle is, well, then there's the honeymoon period. I'm sorry, I will never do this behavior again. I will change. I didn't mean this. This wasn't directed at you. It was directed at, the fact that, we don't have enough money in the checkbook at the end of the month, or those kinds of things. And then there's that tension building phase again. And many times when we talk to clients at the Marjorie Mason Center, they share with us that they can tell when that tension building phase is happening. And so what they're trying to do is everything they can to not have that explosion happen again. Yeah. If I change my behavior, if I have dinner on the table as soon as my partner walks in the door, if the kids don't act up. But essentially, that explosion ends up happening, and that cycle continues again. And so what happens with domestic violence is many times it happens over a period of years. The average is it takes someone 7 to 8 times before that domestic violence has occurred to actually choose to leave that relationship or to seek help. And so what happens is the wheel just sort of starts spinning faster and faster, and there's less amount of time between those different phases.
Fresno County, at least nominally, is named as, well, it's got so many problems with the environment and with the economy and with everything. And then it says, yeah, and it's also a very violent, is it disproportionately a violent place to live, that there, or just another tough thing about living in Fresno, there will be violence in your home?
We look at it a couple of ways. So per capita, the call rates regarding domestic violence in Fresno County are 63% higher than the state average. So when you look at that number, it's alarming. It's at epidemic numbers. We look at it a couple ways. So the other side to look at that is that in Fresno County, people are very aware that they have resources to help them. So it could be, some of it is that it's an epidemic proportion, but some is that they also are calling and seeking help from law enforcement, from partners that we have in the industry, from the Marjorie Mason Center to actually get help to make a change in that cycle.
How would, since it could be one or the other, I immediately thought the worst, that, oh my God, we're 63% or 63 times worse. What would you who work there, what would Nicole and the staff, what do you think? Is it that you're addressing it and therefore you're getting calls, or, oh my God, this is just terrible here?
I think it's some of both, unfortunately.
Wow.
I think we are, the Marjorie Mason Center, we're going to talk about that a little bit later in the program. We've been around for 40 years. So I think we are well equipped to help people in our community when they are facing domestic violence situations. We actually have a very strong program where we work with offenders, and so that's something we'll get into later as well. So I think that's part of it. The other part is that, I think just society in general, we have more pressures on us. We're living with less margin in our lives. We are, even though Marjorie Mason is not a faith-based agency, I will say as a believer, I think we're living in a society that's far from what God intended for us. And so I think you begin to see those pressures manifest in a variety of ways, and violence in the home is one of those.
Why don't we look at immediately now a way to be in touch with you? We're going to do this at the end of the program, but if they did want to be in touch with Marjorie Mason Center, what number do they call? Where do they go?
Well, we are blessed to have a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week, 365-day-a-year hotline that is able to help people when they call and when they choose to get help. That number is 233-4357 or 233-HELP is that number. Also at our administrative office at 1600 M Street in Fresno, we have crisis response members there 24/7, 365. So many times law enforcement will bring someone to our doors, or someone will bring themselves and say, it's time for me to get help. We do a crisis intake assessment right then and there. And if it is deemed that they are in a emergency situation, we are working with them on resources, housing, all those different kinds of services that we'll talk about later in the program, to make sure that they get the help, not only for themselves as an adult, but also for their children living in the home with them.
Why don't we look at now, finally, in the middle program,
Sure.
the story of Marjorie Mason and the Marjorie Mason Center before we see that powerful video about the center. So tell us about Marjorie Mason and the beautiful legacy and the work that you do.
Well, one of the privileges I've had in the time that I've been at the Marjorie Mason Center is to not only get to know Marjorie's story, but to get to know her family. Her family is still very engaged and involved at the agency, and just a beautiful, beautiful group of people. So I feel very blessed by that. But Marjorie was tragically murdered at the age of 36 in 1978. She was actually finishing her degree at Fresno State. She was very involved in her church. She had a job working in the community, and it was actually by an ex-boyfriend who was also a deputy at the sheriff's department. And so she had ended that relationship, but as she was nearing her graduation, he started contacting her and letting her know that he would like to throw her graduation party. He would like them to reconnect. And when she turned down those invitations, he got angry. And so it ended up resulting in first him kidnapping her, beating her, raping her, and letting her go. And when she talked with friends and family members, she knew, because he worked for law enforcement, that she didn't want to go to the police, and so they encouraged her to go to the hospital. And we know that medical professionals are mandated reporters, and that's nothing negative against them. It was just the unfortunate way things rolled out. He became aware that that incident had been reported and actually kidnapped her a second time, which then resulted in her death and him taking his own life as a result. And so the family and the community were just devastated to lose such a bright light in our community, and thus became the Marjorie Mason Center, opening its doors in January of 1979. It was actually one of the first domestic violence cases nationwide to receive national attention. Because back in the 70s, domestic violence wasn't not only talked about, but it actually there wasn't a process to deal with it in law enforcement. At that time, they were trained that it was a private family matter. If they were called for a domestic violence instance, what they needed to do was figure out how to separate the two partners and get them both in safety and just let things cool down. And so, we've come a long way for sure, but there's still lots of work to do. Federal laws didn't change till actually 1994 about domestic violence, and that was the death of Nicole Brown Simpson that happened, and that's when actually federally the Violence Against Women Act was instated, that actually had a process of how communities dealt with domestic violence.
We do have that powerful, short little Vimeo video. Why don't we see that and hear that now, and appreciate the pain people go through, but the healing that the Marjorie Mason Center offers.
Marjorie Mason Center, named after her, she would have been so proud, because that's what she was all about. Helping people, helping young ladies achieve their goals and continue on with life.
Personally, I wish I would have spoken up sooner.
I had been in a physically
emotionally, mentally abusive marriage.
Well, I didn't know it was abusive at first because it started verbally.
I thought I was gonna die that night. And by the grace of God, I did not. And I found this place and literally changed my life, so.
The last time he tried to put chlorine in a syringe and he wanted to put it in my vein. And at that moment when that happened, I was just like, he's gonna kill me. I never heard of Marjorie Mason. That's why when I got here, I was like, oh wow, like it just, like it saved my life.
Just walking into the building, it was just a sense of peace.
To this day, I'll never forget it. It's gonna get me emotional.
It was a big change, but it was like a good change, you know. I was getting sober, and my children, I've never seen them sleep so comfortable, where I don't have to worry about anyone, you know, busting the door down or, you know, whatever it was.
I have a healthy marriage today, and I have, wonderful relationships with my children.
So I'm a teacher, so I'm trying to make a difference, and I'm trying to show my daughters that this is not acceptable.
To get my general ed, I really want to get into criminology. That's what I want.
And I sit here and I know I'm lucky to be alive. And there's many like Marjorie Mason that were not. And it's not worth the gamble.
Just that comfort, you know, of being safe. And it was a big step. I didn't want to leave. But, you know, I ended up leaving, and now I'm with my children and we're all safe.
I really thought I was at the end of my road, that I had to stay.
And just to see how far I've come, and I really do credit the Marjorie Mason Center and this group.
Her death wasn't in vain. It means something. And I know if she was living today, and if she could speak to us today, she would say, job well done.
That for 40 years, your agency has been able to share charity.
Well, I will start by saying, domestic violence is a heavy topic. I know we've talked about a lot of things so far in this session, but there is hope, and there is healing available. There's help available, and so, Marjorie Mason Center is able to provide safe housing that can be residential or non-residential help. We work with clients on whatever is best for them and their family. We have case managers that work side by side with all of our clients. We offer counseling, legal assistance in filing, some of those specific documents like restraining orders or child protective orders that are important, and then education and prevention that we do in the community. So we try to go at domestic violence from a holistic approach of hitting all the sides of looking at domestic violence. The other part of that is that working with offenders. One of our, we actually have 7 offices now in Fresno County, but one of those offices is to work primarily through the probation department with offenders who have who have received a sentence regarding abuse. And it is a 52-week program. Wow. That we actually work with, and they learn anger management, they learn proper framing, they learn, how to communicate to make sure that the cycle stops. Just because they committed this act one time doesn't mean that has to define who they are, that has to be something that is definitely they carry that with them for the rest of their life, but that they can be in the current relationship that they're in or go into a future relationship with a different outlook, with a more positive outlook. So that's our goal for everyone that we work with, hope and healing.
And then there are certain costs to what is this ministry, and certain statistics that we might be able to look at and discuss. For the shelter, for example, what might you want to comment about how the community can be involved?
Sure, absolutely. You know, we need help supporting the cause. For 40 years, going on 41 now, Marjorie Mason Center has been able to keep its doors open because of the support of our community partners. And so one of those numbers to highlight is it takes $119 a day to provide all the services that we provide for a client. So that is case management, all those different services that they may take advantage of, counseling, legal assistance, you know, food, beds, all those kinds of things. And so, you know, on average, we are housing anywhere from 350 to 400 adults and children every day. That ends up being about 6,100 people we are helping annually. And so, you know, we need the community's help for sure to help in the cycle of violence. Another part of that, you know, many people think, well, I can't help monetarily. Well, another thing that we can do is understand and recognize that healthy families build healthy communities, but healthy families begin in the home. And so it's looking at our own sinful behaviors and recognizing that, you know, because of sin in the world, that we're selfish, that we make choices every day that may go against the heart of God, and looking at those and saying, what can I do to be a healthier spouse, a healthier parent, to teach my child what a healthy relationship looks like, and really look inwardly, which is sometimes very hard for us to do.
How would you wish in the next minute to close the short program, how can the community immediately get on board with you? Remind us of how to be in touch and
Sure.
how we could support what you're
Absolutely.
doing.
Well, first I would say pray for us. Pray for the work of the Marjorie Mason Center. Pray for your politicians and those who are passing bills and laws that have to do with violence and abuse in our society. Secondly is, if you need help as an individual, do not hesitate to call us. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 233-4357 or 233-HELP. The next thing would be if you feel a tug at your heart that you would like to help the work that we do in Fresno County and in our community, you can also call that hotline and ask to speak with me. My name is Charity, and we will work with you on how to become a partner with the Marjorie Mason Center and help us in the work to build healthy families in our community.
Usually we think in one show we can cover a topic. We kind of knew we would have you back. We scratched the surface. We really talked, some important words were put on the table, but we need to have you back to unpack more about what is going on with domestic violence, teen violence, another topic we'll discuss, and how we as people of faith could connect with this societal issue. Thank you so much, Charity. God bless.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you.